I've told this story to a lot of people over the years, and it's really pretty humorous. I don't take any of it personally, and enough time has passed to where nobody will get upset by the absolute truth of it. It's just the reality of, shall we say, big-time rock, big-time touring, and big-time show business.
90,000 plus people watching right there. Cup of coffee in the big time.
So I was in a band backing up Linda Ronstadt and opening for Jackson Browne and the Eagles on New Year's Eve on what was probably the biggest night for musicians in history at that time. It was the year 1999 into 2000. It was called the Millennium Concert. Every musician and artist I knew had a huge gig for great fees that night. No matter who they were, somewhere in the world they had a huge gig. It was the biggest and best New Year's in history. My super talented buddy John Gilliton asked me, he's a piano player by the way, he asked me if I would join an ensemble backing up Linda Ronstadt for a series of warm-up gigs leading up to opening for Jackson and the Eagles at the Staples Center. The Staples Center is now called the Crypto.com Arena. We had Greg Bissonette on drums, Bob Glaub on bass, the aforementioned John Gilliton on keyboards, and the legendary Waddy Wachtel on guitar. So we did a few rehearsals here in LA, and then we did a short road trip. We went to San Diego, we went to Harrah's, Reno, Tahoe, we went to Tucson, Arizona, and these gigs prepared us for the New Year's Eve to follow. We got back to LA, and on the day of the gig, security was tight, as you might imagine. I drove down to the venue at around 2 p.m., downtown, Staples Center, and the first task was sort of like going to the DMV. I was issued a photo ID laminated pass that I wore around my neck. I stood in line and got my photo ID. Now, I even heard that Don Henley had trouble with security. I think he had a moment of, hey, don't you know who I am? I mean, he's not used to wearing a pass or telling people who he is. So there was some sort of kerfuffle, some angry words were exchanged, and everything was settled, and Henley got into his own concert. Man, I was so excited. I brought my wife with me, and though no tickets to the actual concert had been provided to us, we're used to that sometimes on big gigs. It's not, don't take it personally. I planned on hanging around in the huge acreage on either side of the stage backstage. You've seen it. There's the big stage way up high, and all the space on each side. So I planned on watching the concert from the side. Well, our set was pretty short and a bit odd because the house lights were on for part of it. We were playing our hearts out, and Linda was singing her heart out while an empty arena began to slowly fill with New Year's Eve revelers, i.e. the audience. We're playing, and they're walking in and sitting down. Man, I was a bit nervous, but it went by so quickly, it felt great to finish and look forward to a fantastic evening watching Jackson Browne's band and the Eagles play their hits. Now, because my top-level all-access photo ID laminated pass was this golden thing on my chest, we walked around everywhere freely while I watched Jackson and his incredible band, including Mark Goldenberg on guitar. Check him out if you ever get a chance. About halfway through the Jackson set, my wife and I went backstage, and I was informed all of a sudden that my backstage access was about to be revoked and denied. We were informed that at the end of Jackson Browne's set, we were no longer welcome in the building. Well, my mind went into overdrive, and I began to investigate, and I realized that all of the Eagles crew and support staff, and of course Don Henley and everybody, had a tiny yellow dot, a sticker that had been attached to their laminated photo ID credentials. So a little yellow circle sticker that was attached. We didn't have the yellow dot. My mind began to spin, and I began to formulate workarounds. What could we do to stay in the concert? I was about to give up, and then a light bulb went off in my head. I remembered that my friend Dave Cavelli had spent 4 years with us on the road with Rick Springfield. And I saw him earlier that day, congratulated him because he was the manager of the Staples Center. That meant he ran every event, sporting or concert. He was the manager of the whole thing every night. And I said, Dave, any chance of us getting credentials to stay? Because they want us out of here. And he came down laughing with a couple of passes from his people, because he's got all the security people, everybody. So we had all access passes from Dave Cavelli and the Staples Center. So Patty and I attached our Staples Center passes to our pants or shirts or whatever and sat by the side of the stage because we wanted to see the Eagles. It was a ghost town, by the way. We watched Eagles staffers pass us by with daggers in their eyes over and over as they looked at us sitting there, and they were about to eject us because we didn't have the yellow dot, but then they saw our Staples Center credentials, which were unimpeachable. I found the Eagles to be really, really great, and Joe Walsh was an incredible presence. He has so much rock energy. To me, he was the front man of the band. We really enjoyed the show. We sat on the side. Boy, I felt really lucky to have found a workaround and found a way to not get thrown out of the building. Okay, but there was one more hurdle, one more moment of awkwardness and humble pie. We decided to leave and drive away before the encore to beat traffic. So I went to the backstage, my dressing room, and an LAPD officer stopped me at the hall entrance where all the dressing rooms were. Even with all my credentials, during the Eagles concert, it was a forbidden zone to go back into the dressing rooms. They do that for security. I don't blame them for doing that. But I had to start telling this nice officer my story about how I had just been on stage in Linda Ronstadt's band and opened, and we were going to leave, and my guitar was in the backstage, my backstage, and please, sir, could I go get it so that we could drive away? And he understood, and he let us back there. So he gave us an exemption to walk down the hallowed halls of Eagledom into my dressing room, my former dressing room, and grab my guitar so we could drive home. I'm very grateful that I got to experience the show and survive what I sometimes call the pirate ghost ship of big-time rock and roll. Survival of the fittest. There's actually another and milder version of this that I had been through before. The event was 1985's Live Aid concert in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was in Rick Springfield's band, and we were scheduled in front of the crowd of, I think, 80,000 early in the day. We opened for a long list of big, big artists. Madonna, Eric Clapton, Mick Jagger, Tom Petty, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Bob Dylan, and Led Zeppelin with Phil Collins filling in for John Bonham. You remember the story about he did the British Live Aid, got on the Concorde, and then flew to America and did the American Live Aid. After we finished our 10 a.m. set, I was very excited to stay and hang out and watch and listen to the amazing day of artists. Now, if you think it's crazy that we started at 10, Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne opened for us, along with Joan Baez and some other big artists. So we were in a pretty good slot. Well, at that moment, I was about 25 years old and really just wide-eyed about the whole world. And I did not know what was about to happen. I was really looking forward to staying there and just watching the whole concert. Well, my backstage pass expired at 1 p.m. So it was not so friendly as we got closer to that moment. And I still had access to my dressing room. It was about to be given up to somebody else. But I remember grabbing my things and watching Tom Petty and Crosby, Stills and Nash and Bob Dylan all hanging out with each other, hugging and laughing, old friends. I didn't take it personally, but it was like, oh, I see how this works. And it makes sense, you know, they don't want the riffraff backstage, I guess. I don't know. It was cool, but it actually was the first time I had been through this, and I understand why it happens. They like to have control backstage, and you can't have huge crowds and people getting bothered, and it just makes for a cleaner backstage. But you got to realize backstages are not the most joyous places. I mean, even if you're fully welcome as the band manager or wives or girlfriends or family or kids, it's very, very quiet back there. Not really a party anymore. It's meant to be secure and safe and quiet and give people their space to get their game going before they get up on stage.